Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our program. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones. And I want to thank the Community Center for allowing us to use their space for this program. This program is also in partnership with the Lexington School Committee. I'd like to welcome Dr. Joseph Moldover and Michael Delman, who are your speakers today.
Okay, well, thank you guys for coming out, and we'll just welcome people as they trickle in. I know there's a couple of local events tonight that people are going to, but I'll give you just a quick preview of what we're going to be doing. I am Joe Moldover. I'm the guy on the right, a clinical psychologist. I've been practicing in the greater Boston area for almost 25 years, and I specialize in doing evaluations of kids and teenagers and working with schools, working with families in schools. I'm not a therapist, but I do a lot of ongoing work with families and trying to support families and things like that. My practice is over in Wellesley, and I'm very happy to be joined tonight by Michael Delman, CEO of Beyond Booksmart, who will do his own introduction when he gets up here. I'm going to speak for a few minutes. I have what I kind of consider to be the depressing part of the night, where I'm going to talk about all of the different problems out there and different statistics about child mental health and things that are going to make us feel very grave and very down and very dour. And then I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who will tell us what we can actually do to make things better. So he will pull us up out of that dive. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A at the end and just have a conversation and have a discussion. So that is basically the plan for the night. There is a presentation, by the way, next month by Carrie Smith. Helen, when is Carrie Smith here? Remember the date?
Yeah, so Carrie Mayer is going to be having a coffee and roundtable discussion talking about navigating smartphones and social media. That's going to be here at the community center on October 23rd. That's it.
Great, yeah. So I think that'll also be a great follow-up to tonight. Carrie's a parent coach, and she'll be talking about things like family dynamics and navigating relationships with her kids around things like technology. And she's a fantastic resource. So come back for that. So I'm going to jump into my part of the presentation. I've probably stuffed too much information into it, so I'm going to move through it pretty quickly and try to hand the mic over to Michael so we can give you guys some practical advice. But I'm going to start here with this idea that times have changed very quickly. I think this is something we all understand. The technology has changed quickly. The culture has changed quickly. And something that has changed is the way that our kids play. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about play and what play is. And I should say, going into this part of the presentation, a lot of this content is based on the book The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which some of you may have read. It's a very influential book right now in child psychology and parenting. So I'm going to move through this quickly, but for those of you who want to do a deeper dive, that's a fantastic resource. So why do kids play? Why do kids spend so much time playing? So play is basically a set of experiences that are meant to wire up our kids' brains for adulthood, to get our kids' brains ready to be adults. It's how we train our bodies and train our brains to be adults. And adults keep on playing. We play, non-human animals play, my cat plays every day, but kids are really where it's at. Kids are the ones who play the most and for whom play is especially vital. And why? Why is play so crucial for kids? So here are some fun facts about the brain. On a child's 5th birthday, their brain is already 90% of its ultimate adult size. In contrast, their body is only about 40 to 45% of its ultimate weight, and they're only about 20 to 25%, I'm sorry, their ultimate height, and only about 20 to 25% of their ultimate weight. So, newsflash, 5-year-olds are small, but their brains are not. Their brains are already 90% of the way there. Why is that? Why does that make sense? A child's brain is like a block of marble. Sometimes I feel that way about my 16-year-old. I very much feel like her brain is like a block of marble when she's not listening to me. But a 5-year-old's brain is also like a block of marble. It has about 100 billion neurons and about 1,000 trillion synapses, which is the space where a neuron meets. It's an unimaginable number. And about half of these will be lost, will be pruned away, will be carved out by the time that child reaches adulthood on a use it or lose it basis. Basically, the brain is this big block that gets carved out in terms of what the environment demands, what the child actually needs. And the stuff that gets carved out is gone. And on one hand, this is great. This allows us to adapt to an endless set of environments. Humans can live in the Arctic, we can live in the rainforest, we can adapt to anything. We have a chance to wire our brains and wire our kids' brains in whole new ways that have nothing to do with the world that we lived in 10,000 years ago. And for most of human history, that was sort of fine. For most of human history, we lived a particular way, kids played a particular way, and then in the next generation, it was kind of the same. There was very slow change, very gradual growth, and people would adapt slowly. Today, it's different. So I was born in 1976. Many of you are maybe roughly the same age, maybe a little bit younger. But this is a pretty good depiction of my memory of playing as a child. And this is what a lot of play looks like today. It is radically different. It is an extremely different environment. We've seen environmental change, technological change that is massively faster than anything else in human history. And at the same time that that's happened, at the same time that the technology has changed, that we got something new, that we got these computers that we carry around in our pockets, something old also went away. Old ways of playing, old ways of interacting also went away. So from the 1990s onward, roughly coinciding with the rise of the Internet 1.0, parents also began to become less comfortable with free play. So we started spending more time with our kids, programming our kids more, maybe becoming overprotective. That's something we can talk about. Why did this happen? There were a lot of things that went into this, okay? And I'm only going to skim the surface of this. But for one thing, we had the growth of media that I think gave people a sense of danger through things like cable news, a sense that bad things were happening to kids all the time, every time you turned around. Parents began to see their own kids as more fragile. Psychological concepts like psychological trauma and psychological safety began to kind of creep into more everyday conversation. And we began to think about our kids as being a little bit less robust and a little bit more vulnerable. And also we began to focus more on achievement, the rise of achievement-oriented parenting. Surveys have shown a steadily growing percentage of parents see their kids' success, their academic success, their vocational success, as the product of their performance as a parent. If I do my job as a parent the right way, if I hit my marks, then my kid's going to go to a good school, my kid's going to have a good job, my kid's going to have a lot of money, my kid's going to live in a town like Lexington, and that's going to show that I did a good job. So it's led us as parents to see our jobs as very competitive, high stakes, zero sum. Now, I want to step back from this for just a second. I should say I've got 4 kids of my own, ranging from age 16 to 23. So we are in the midst of the high school, college, graduate school stuff. And I sort of, when I made this slide, felt the need to kind of step back and challenge it a little bit, because I think it's very easy to be critical of parents. And it's very easy for us to be critical of ourselves for being overprotective or for being achievement oriented and so forth. But I just do want to kind of step back and make a couple of points. First of all, just to acknowledge, in 2025, there actually are a number of dangers in the community. So to take one example, the number of civilian-owned firearms in the US has more than doubled since the 1990s, when some of these parenting trends began. The rate of school shootings has roughly doubled, with more school shootings in the 5 years from 2020 to this year, in spite of school closures, than in the entire decade of the 1990s when I was in high school. We have a history of denial around social changes. So we can look back in many ways to, the 1980s when I was a kid and I was bouncing around the playgrounds and my parents kind of figured everything was okay. But it wasn't necessarily the case, right? So again, just to take one example, the abuses in the Catholic Church brought to light by the Boston Globe and their spotlight investigation stretched back over decades. And so there were things happening in our communities then that actually were threats that people didn't see, didn't acknowledge, turned a blind eye to. And finally, in terms of achievement, well, it is a different economy. I mean, as I said, I'm in the midst of launching my kids, of getting my kids through college. In 1990, about 16% of American workers had jobs in manufacturing. So at 8% today, less than 2% in agriculture. I mean, we all know that the jobs are in the knowledge industries, are jobs that require college degrees, oftentimes require graduate degrees. So if we as parents are very focused on education, achievement, grades, college, that's not just about stats. There is a rational basis behind that. And so these issues are complicated. These issues are complicated. And it's not just about parental neurosis, although certainly we have our fair share of that. I have my fair share of that. But we've had this change. We've had change in technology, and we've had change in culture, these two changes. And change has consequences, and rapid, unplanned change has unforeseen consequences. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to run through these statistics quickly. I think these are things that are familiar to many people. There's been a lot of focus on child and adolescent mental health. So I'm going to touch on these things. And then, as I said, we're going to try to move on quickly to what we can do in a positive way. But just to acknowledge, major depression, the most severe form of depression, among teens has increased 145% for girls, 161% for boys in the decade 2010 to 2020. So that's before the COVID pandemic. That's before the school shutdowns. Anxiety in college students increased 134%, slightly different time frame. Depression, 106%. I know these statistics can be a little bit mind-numbing. I don't mean to barrage you with them, but anxiety disorders, 139% increase from 2008 to 2020 for people ages 18 to 25. I think that's very interesting. So 139% for that demographic, for that young demographic. If you look at people in the 50 plus demographic, an 8% decrease in anxiety disorders during that same time period. So it's not just about societal growth in mental health problems. It's not just about people being more aware of mental health problems. It's not just about psychologists diagnosing more. There is something demographically specific about the kids. These are difficult ones. 2007 to 2019 suicide rate for those in their early 20s rose by 41%. That's more than an additional 1,300 lives lost per year. For 10 to 14-year-olds, very young kids, suicide rate tripled in that time period. CDC survey in 2021 found almost 60% of high school girls experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness over the prior year. A study this year in the UK found a 65% increase in hospitalization for mental health problems in the 2012 to 2022 decade. Again, for people 5 to 18, versus only a 10% increase for non-psychiatric causes. So that's not just COVID. That's not just people having more hospitalization, hospitals admitting people more in general. It's something that is specific to psychiatry. It's a mental health crisis. And crucially, it's hospitalization. It's not just people saying, I feel sad. That's one of the critiques of these studies sometimes, is that they're self-report. So maybe kids are more willing to say, I feel anxious, I feel sad now than they were in the 1990s. But this isn't just self-report data. This is admissions to the hospital. This is doctors agreeing that these are kids who are in dire circumstances and need help. Bodily dissatisfaction. Body dissatisfaction is correlated with social media use, often persists into adulthood. It can be associated with eating disorders. For girls, I think we're familiar with the idea that this is often associated with weight and general appearance. For boys, also, though, it can manifest as muscle dysmorphia, or what's sometimes called casually bigorexia. Teenagers can compare themselves to others and also to idealized versions of themselves. So they can now apply filters that allow them to see, what would I look like with a smaller nose? What would I look like with a pointier chin? And there's this phrase, Snapchat dysmorphia, referring to people seeking out cosmetic procedures specifically to look like their filtered selfies, to look like the idealized versions of themselves that are being bounced back from their screens. More bad news. Pre-adolescent and adolescent boys are increasingly targeted by online influencers pushing violent and misogynistic content. Often when boys are just searching for content on topics such as gaming, fitness, and sports, a study last year, again in the UK, found that 2/3 of boys in the 11 to 14 demographic have been exposed to online content promoting misogyny within 30 minutes of being online, and 10% within a minute, within 60 seconds of being online. So this stuff finds our kids when they're online. It's not just kids going looking for it. 2022 UK study found 70% of female teachers reported facing misogyny from their male students, and a similar finding in Australia. I realize I'm sort of racing through a lot of really negative stuff here. And again, I promise that we will pivot into what we can do. But just to barrage you for one or two more slides, it's not just the mental health issues. It's not just misogyny. It's not just violence. It's also gambling. 75% of online sports bettors are male. The market is $125 billion, up almost 9% from last year. And problem gamblers typically start in childhood. They report starting as early as age 10, age 12. The majority of 12-year-olds today, if you talk to them, report having engaged in some form of gambling. It's incredibly easy for kids to gamble on their phones, on sports, on current events, on politics, on entertainment, on anything. And again, most people with gambling addictions begin in their teens, and gambling addictions are terrible disorders with serious consequences. One study found a 17% suicide attempt rate among those with problem gambling. So it's really no joke. So I've just sort of sketched out for you a whole array of horrible things. And I began by talking about some of the changes that we've seen, by talking about changes in technology, changes in culture. What's the link? How do these things link up? What's the relationship between this kind of handy, cool, seemingly innocuous phone that we all have in our pockets? What's the link between some of the shifts in parenting that we've seen over the last generation and the statistics that I've just depressed you with? So this is taken directly from John Haidt's book. And again, I encourage you to do a deeper dive if this is something that you're interested in. But to skim through this quickly, Haidt talks about 4 harms, about 4 types of harm, 4 links that connect change with these negative outcomes. Social deprivation. So the phones serving as experience blockers, blocking us off from the real world. During the early decades of this century, minutes per day spent with friends dropped off very sharply among that 15 to 24 demographic that I talked about earlier, the ones with a spike in the anxiety disorders, with much more stability around the older people, which again was the group that actually had stability and even some decline in terms of anxiety. So it was this younger demographic that was being cordoned off by the experience blocker. And if any of you aren't feeling guilty enough tonight, I'll help you. A 2014 survey, over 10 years old, found 64% of children said that their parents were often distracted when they tried to talk to them, most of them by their phones. And I think we've all had the experience of our kids trying to talk to us, or trying to watch our kids, trying to do things with our kids, but also doing this, also doing the multitasking. So it's something which is an experience blocker for our kids, and it is an experience blocker for the family. So there's social deprivation. Sleep deprivation. Phones disrupt sleep in two ways, behaviorally and biologically. So phones bring TV shows and movies, games, gambling, pornography, chatting and bullying and flirting into your kid's bed all night long, if we let them have their phones. So that's a behavioral effect. It's also biological. The blue light from the screens inhibits melatonin production, which inhibits the which delays the onset of sleep. Melatonin is released by the pineal gland, which is very sensitive to light, is located at the optic chiasm behind the eyes. And so that blue light directly, physically, biologically inhibits the secretion of melatonin. And then sleep deprivation, in turn, is associated with almost every negative outcome we can think of. Mental health problems and poor learning. And people know this. So the quote, "We're competing with sleep on the margin," I believe was from a Netflix executive. It could be Facebook, but I believe it was a Netflix executive. I should have the attribution here. But people who design the things on the phones know what they're doing, and they know they're competing with sleep, and they know they're trying to do that. Attention fragmentation. So push notifications debuted in iPhones 2009. Today, the average adolescent receives an alert about every 5 minutes, whether that's news, texts, a retail alert, there's a sale, there's social media. And we could spend the whole night talking about ADHD, and we can talk about that more in the Q&A if people want to. But I'm just going to sort of briefly say that ADHD is a misnomer. It should be called attention control deficit. People with ADHD have just as much attention as anybody else. They're not deficient in their amount of attention. They struggle to direct their attention. They struggle to control their attention. They struggle to pull their attention away from the cool stuff and to lock it on to the stuff that's not intrinsically interesting. And so it's attention to control that's the problems. And so not surprisingly, adolescents with ADHD are heavier tech users. If I can't control my attention effectively, if my attention is like a spotlight that's just swinging to the most interesting thing in the environment, then of course, when my phone pings in my pocket, I'm not going to be able to filter that out. That's obvious. But there's also evidence for the reverse, that heavy tech use may contribute to attention problems, that living a childhood where you're constantly having your attention pulled, where the environment is constantly tugging your attention away, can contribute to deficits in attention control and can lead to higher rates of ADHD. This one I do have the attribution is from the past president of Facebook. How do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? These devices are meant to get your attention. Okay, people know what they're doing. And finally, addiction. So again, it could be a topic of an entire presentation, but behavioral addiction, we know it's not the same as chemical addiction, it's not the same as alcohol addiction, but it has many of the same features, including a sense of powerlessness when faced with a stimulus, including a sense of habituation, finding that what used to do it for you doesn't do it for you anymore, and you need more of it. So with alcohol, if you don't get the same feeling from one drink, you need 2 drinks, you need 3 drinks, needing more of it to get the same effect. And the experience of withdrawal, the down, when you're not getting it, the crash. And people with behavioral addiction, whether it's to technology, whether it's gambling addiction, experience many of those same things. So the Apple App Store debuted in 2008 with 500 apps. By 2013, it had more than 1 million. I don't know what the count is today. The vast majority of those apps are free. About 95% are free, which means, I think we all understand, that what's being sold is us. What's being sold is our attention, because those apps are dependent on advertiser revenue. So app designers have a huge incentive to use the principles of behavioral psychology, like variable reinforcement schedules, to pull kids to their platforms and keep them there. These are very good psychologists designing these apps. And the entire game is to disrupt attention, capture attention, and keep attention, because that's how the apps are monetized. So, in sum, in the first decade of the 21st century, the technological innovations of the 20th century are increasingly online, personalized, away from adult oversight. And during the 2010s, kids and teenagers had constant peer social access and obligation via phone and text. They had an open portal to first person, mimetic violence, pornography, gambling. I told you I was going to be US press. Appearance judgment, body shaming, toxic influencers, and real-time social comparison 24 hours a day. What could possibly go wrong with that scenario? So we've talked about what can go wrong. We've talked about some of the mental health effects. I want to say one thing about this before I turn things over to Michael, because I think we're going to talk this evening, and Carrie's going to talk next month about what we can do as individuals and as parents and how we can help our kids. But I also want to acknowledge and just sort of, open the discussion to saying that this is partly a public health problem that no family can solve on their own. And it's not the first time it's happened. It's not the first time that a new fast-moving technology has disrupted the world and has negative consequences. And I'm going to spend 3 minutes of your night just talking about cars, okay? Because this is actually a very interesting history that I wound up doing a deep dive on, and I'm going to spare you most of it, but not entirely. So for a variety of reasons, car ownership exploded after World War II, and it was terrible. By the 1950s, car deaths were a huge problem. It was gruesome. They were more than twice what they are today per mile driven. Cars were very dangerous, and driving was a fairly dangerous activity in a way that we would never accept today. Most cars didn't have seatbelts. Drunk driving laws were lax. There was limited regulation around how cars were built, around road safety and how roads were designed, and then that changed. That did change. So Ralph Nader came along. He published Unsafe at Any Speed in 1965. Congress acted, creating the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. The environment was changed by people who wouldn't accept that level of risk. So the technology, the cars in that case, although in our case it could be the phones or the apps, were made safer. So we mandated seatbelts. The environment was made safer. So we have breakaway telephone poles that if we crash into them, will hopefully be less lethal, and guardrails. In the same way that the cyber environment can be made safer for kids. And at-risk populations were identified. So we figured out that new drivers were the ones who were crashing a lot. And we developed things like provisional driver's licenses to drive our adolescents crazy. And in the same way, we can talk about at-risk populations this evening. As I showed you, this is a demographically specific problem. This is younger people who are experiencing the depression and the anxiety and are most at risk. And there was also a cultural change. So mothers began to start to drive, which happened in 1980 by a mother who lost her teenage daughter. And they advocated for efforts to raise the drinking age in all 50 states, and that has saved over 3,000 lives. And so the technology changed, the environment changed, the culture changed, because at a public health level, not at a family level, but at a public health level, people decided that this was not okay. And that this technology, cars, had exploded into the culture without anybody really thinking through what it meant and how to handle it and how to design it. And I think we're in a similar moment today. So there's the public health aspect to it. And that's important. And I know that there's some organization here in Lexington that we may hear from later on this evening about that perspective. But we can also support our kids individually, including to teach them the executive functioning skills that they need to navigate this environment. And I'm going to hand the mic off to Michael Delman to tell you a little bit more about that and hopefully to have a little bit more of an optimistic perspective. So Michael, give you this.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm supposed to cheer you up in 30 minutes after that. And I'm stand over here. Hi. Okay, great. So Yeah, so my job is to not give you false hope, but to give you a stronger sense of what you personally and individually can do, even though so many of the things we need are community-based and even further. So my name is Michael Delman. I'm going to be talking to you about executive function skills. These are the skills that are located in this part of your brain. So you kind of go there. If you can all just go like this for a quick second, hold up one hand, tuck your thumb in, wrap your fingers around it. Some of you may know this is a hand model of the brain. And this part represents the prefrontal cortex, which is where good decisions are made and the various skills. If you go like this thumb represents the amygdala, which is the fight or flight response. And so that is a little bit of kind of just the brain. These two are competing. And we're going to talk about how we can get our kids to be operating more from this part of the brain than this part of the brain so they can actually make good decisions, and how you as parents can support them. So that's the goal. I want to leave you with a roadmap that you'll be able to bring home, try some things out immediately and not have to wait. And some copies of my book are back there. Just take one. Happy to give it to you. It's a gift. So the executive function skills can fall under various categories, but the one that's at the very center you'll see is this one, the self-regulation skill. We call this the gatekeeper skill at Beyond Book Smart. The idea is that the very first thing is that our kids need to be calm enough that they're not operating from their amygdala, they're operating from this prefrontal cortex where they can make good decisions. I was giving a talk in Florida and I saw a bunch of teachers in the back going like this to each other. Yes. And that afterward I said, what was this? And they said, we're going to call that the bat signal. And we're going to flash that to students that desperately need it in the middle of class, just a little, hey, Tommy, right? So if we understand a little bit about how the brain works, and we understand that this skill, which is essentially how do you stay calm in the face of things that are worrisome, anxiety producing, depressing, etc. If our kids can just get better with this and also manage their impulses, which is the other major component of self-regulation, that alone will get them most of the way there. And what Dr. Moldover is talking about, all these challenges that they face and that we face as parents, that's really the place where we need to begin. And there has been an explosion of kids being dysregulated, being not well regulated. So I want to just make sure that that really kind of lands. All these other skills look so important, right? The ability for our kids to be able to plan and prioritize and manage their time. And oh my gosh, my daughter's so disorganized. She can't find her stuff. And my son, he can't focus long enough and pay attention. Can't get started on tasks. Cognitive flexibility, a little more complicated, but the ability to shift perspective and dive down into details and back to the big picture and so on. Memory, different kinds of memory, short-term, long-term. All those are really, really, really important, but they need self-regulation to be roughly in place to be developed. So our job as parents is actually first and foremost to help our kids learn to regulate themselves when they're stressed. Here's the way you do it. It's very simple. When they come home from school and they're really upset, you look them right in the eye and you say, calm down, right? Does that work? Yeah. Do what I say. Start your homework. Yeah, probably not. We're going to have to be a little more sophisticated. They are a complex group, these kids. So, and depending on age and so forth, but we're going to go over what can we do to help them with that. The last thing you'll see on the outside is metacognition. That's the ability to know what's working and not working and how to make the proper adjustments. So that's another skill. I'm going to boil this down to a much simpler image for you in a moment. I want you to see that. I want to first just go backwards and tie all this. How does this tie to what Joe was talking about with these 4 harms that was discussed by hate? So social, sleep, attention, and addiction. Okay. Very difficult to form great social relationships as a kid, right? Or even to get along with your siblings, right? That's always impossible. But to get along with anybody, if you don't have that self-regulation, it's really difficult. And I'm going to tell you one extra little bonus tip here on why. It's not just that, oh, this kid's so annoying or this kid's so, weird or whatever. It's also something known as mirror neurons. I don't know if that rings a bell for some of you know what those are. So basically this, imagine that you're watching a football game and the quarterback is back, arm out, ready to go, looking, and you see what's about to happen and the quarterback doesn't see it. What's about to happen? Sack, right? It's just a total takedown, big smack. And you see the quarterback go, head snaps back. You hear some sort of crunching sound and you feel your face there. Why did you do that? You felt it. Okay, that's a very empathic human being right there. So we have this ability to relate to other people that allows us to communicate with each other without a word. We just understand each other. Now, some people don't have great mirror neurons, but for our kids, being dysregulated not only gets in the way of their behavior, but actually people feel it. If I was up here right now and I was super nervous and you saw me, you're like, I'm like, so anyway, you'd feel nervous. You'd feel terrible for me. You would. Well, some of you would, but most of you would. My wife's back there. She'd be laughing hard, right? All right. Sleep has such terrible impact on driving and everything else. So it really, really has a massive impact on executive function. So it's very difficult to focus if you're tired, right? So I'll try to keep this so you don't get too tired and you can stay focused. And attention, of course, is a major executive function skill. And then addiction, try talking to a kid, well, you may have had this experience, who's buried deep in some video game and you say, 5 more minutes, and they go, Do they have any idea what 5 minutes are at that moment? They may never have an idea. But do they have any idea then how much time has passed? No, because they're off in their addiction with their game, right? More on that. So what we want to be able to teach people, and our kids in particular, so that they are resilient in what are admittedly difficult times, is how they can handle the tech overload, how they can handle distractions, how they can manage stress and uncertainty, and how they can stay focused on things that they care about and that we care about. And we got to find a way to bridge those two, even though they have a lot of competing demands. So here's a tough one. Our role as parents. Joe mentioned his 4 kids. We've got 2, 25 and 21. We've been there through the high school thing, through the college thing. It's very hard to let go of control and to be a little more in the mentoring space with our kids, but it's how they grow. Now, obviously, when they're in 2nd grade, we're going to say a lot more like, you can't do that. That's not okay. But as they get older, and even at those young ages, we want them to think a little bit about, do you know why that's not okay? Because the more that they do some of that processing and thinking for themselves, the more they develop that self-talk and the ability to go, that's not okay. They're internalizing this and they'll get better and better. So we want to shift from being managers to mentors, and we want to be able to step out of that role of being snowplow parents, push everything out of the way, or drill sergeants who tell them what to do all the time. I'm a dad. I relate to that a little bit more. The helicoptering stuff. And I think the bird reduction technique is what we should all use. Everybody knows the bird reduction. No one knows that. I made that one up. So the bird reduction technique is this. I went to a home and it was in Natick, and the mom said, my child only focuses when I'm right there in the room, helping them study, coaching them, prompting them, redirecting them. And I said, so, he's in 7th grade. Would you like him to be more independent by 8th grade? And even more so by high school, college? She said, well, of course. And I said, okay, so what you're doing now, helping, not helping? She's like, no, I'm nagging. It's not helping. I know it's not helping. I said, okay, look around. What do you see in the room? She's like, I don't know, windows, a table. I said, right, what's outside the windows? Guess what was outside the windows? Bird feeders, oodles of bird feeders, like 5 bird feeders with air. I mean, the most beautiful New England birds, right? Blue jays, cardinals. said, this is going to be pretty tough because I'm already distracted and I'm supposed to be in here helping you. So I think this could be difficult. What do we do? And she's like, we could close the shades. I said, great. What else? Well, there's another room where it's a little less comfortable. Right, what else? So we started talking about changing the environment so that it was an easier study environment, right? Better place to learn. And this is one of the techniques for her to be able to ease back and let her child step up. And I said, the final adjustment to the room, ask your child what they need. Always try to figure out what do they think. Some kids come up with some remarkably good ideas, like a three-sided poster board to block out physical distractions around them. Obviously, turning off the phones, getting them out of the room, turning off notifications, etc. So this is our job, right? We're teaching them skills that get them to be increasingly capable and independent, not just rescuing them. Okay, this is my favorite slide. I hope I'll be able to show you why it's not the most beautiful slide, but to me, this is like pure beauty. If you were to walk into the house and your child was there lying on the floor and you weren't sure if they were conscious or not, and you knew something about CPR and all of that, you would have a protocol to follow. You would know ABCs. You check their airways, you'd see if they're breathing, you check their circulation. Easy. Okay, yeah, it's terrifying. But you know what to do because you've been trained. Does that make sense? Like you feel safer, easier, better, and you have a sense of direction. With our kids, we see our kid not, so here's the behavior. My child's not doing his homework. My child's not doing their homework, whatever it is. Okay, what do? You gotta have your North Star. So your North Star begins up here. Make sure that they are not like this. Remember this, right? Remember from 2 minutes ago? Yeah, okay, so they're not in this heightened state of stress. They're okay. So you just check in. Hey, how you doing? You feel okay about the work? Anything on your mind? Do you want, how are you feeling? How was today? Fine. You want to define fine for me? No. Okay. Need a little break before you start your work? Probably. Okay. So maybe they just say, here's my top assignment for today. Here's how much time I think I need. And that's it. But that's getting grounded, making sure they're okay. Part 2 is getting clear. Now, it's okay. We may not be able to walk them through their homework. In fact, it's not really going to help them over time. But do they know what their top priority is? And if they're doing just fine, you don't need to go through all these steps. But if they're struggling and they're not off to a great start, and it's the beginning of the school year, it can be really helpful just to say, hey, you doing okay? Yeah, okay. All right. Listen, I want to stay out of your business. I'm sure you're okay with that, right? 7th grader. Yeah, 4th grader, maybe you don't need to ask that, but do you know what your most important assignment is tonight? I just want to check and then I'll get out of your way. Yeah, I got to really focus on this one thing. It's a lab for whatever. Okay, super. You don't need to go down here to getting organized and helping them, but that is their next step. If they know their priority, the next step is, how do I get organized? By the way, we use this with adults too. Like we coach adults. I use this for myself. This is the path. Am I focused? Am I clear? Am I calm? Yep, good. All right, I'm clear. Great. Now I'm get organized. What's my plan? So with our kids, you don't want to have to go down to this point on the compass unless they're really starting to struggle. Then you might say, you know what? I'm not going to watch you do your homework. I'm not even going to check your homework. But I want to know that you've got a plan. I want to know what time you're starting. I want to know how much time you expect it's going to take. And if you're right and you're able to get to bed and be done and log off the homework channel by 9 p.m., okay, I'll leave you alone. But if I'm finding that homework's not getting turned in, or I see you exhausted and miserable because you're up late, then I may need to turn here to the getting organized phase. So as a coach, that's what I do with students. As parents, you kind of don't necessarily want to be there unless they're young or very receptive or they are strong. Then you need to get to that part. And then the final part that is always a part of it is how do they get started? Because you can have a plan and not do it. So do they know how to get started? So, and then along the way, keep reflecting and modifying. All right. So how do we do it? Getting grounded, we talked about quite a bit. Teach them the bat signal, teach them how to pause and breathe before they start the homework. Model when you're stressed, say, hold on, I need to take a second. I've got to do my 5-finger breathing or my box breathing or some technique maybe you know. We can talk about more of those during Q&A. Are they clear on their priorities? Model that. You can have some sort of quick check-in with the family on Sunday. What's everybody's top priority this week? What's the one thing you want to get done? Yeah, that might be pie in the sky for some. It might be easy for others. But if it works for you, it's worth trying. If it's not a whole family thing, just try it with your kid. Ask them. Being organized, one thing that can be helpful is to have some shared calendars or something on the fridge even, digital or otherwise, but where, hey, there are certain things we all need to see. For example, when you need to have your skates for hockey practice or what have you. We love using the 5-minute goals for kids that don't want to start. This is huge. If a student is if your child's very anxious, say, could you think you could just start your homework for maybe 5 minutes, even though it's intimidating, just 5 minutes, and let's start a timer and we'll turn it upside down. And do that as a counting up. So it's hit the stopwatch, and it's going. And then when you check back, and you're like, hey, how's it going? They're like, I don't know, I guess I'm doing okay. You've been working for 13 minutes. Great. Now you've shown them how 5 minutes can turn into 13 minutes of focus. If they are a student who's very bored, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. There's no point. Do the opposite. Make them more nervous. I know that doesn't sound nice, but there is an optimum stress level. It's been well documented, called the Yerkes-Dodson graph. It's good enough. And here's what it means. When they are feeling bored, great. You think this is easy. Really? How much could you do in 5 minutes? Have a countdown timer and have it right side up and let them see it. Now, ticking clock, closing window, pressure, competition, game on. Finally, really good if it's possible to reflect with them on what's working, what's not working, especially what's working. If you can focus on some of the good with your kids, I was really impressed. Homework, what'd you do differently? I don't know. Okay, you know what? Maybe they don't know this time, but it starts to get them wondering. You're building these skills over time. I'm going to be brief on this because you're going to have a bigger conversation about this soon on October 21st, and there's a lot written about it, and we can talk more if you want. But basically, for training your kids to use technology well, it's really good to co-create agreements. I don't have hard and fast rules on what's right and wrong on this stuff because every kid's a little different. But I would say that these conversations must happen. Part one, you've got to have conversations about what's acceptable and what's not. And you shouldn't hesitate to say, this isn't working. I don't like what's happening here. We're going to put a pause. You need a day off, or you need a couple hours off, or what have you. Because those addictions actually can be quite real and very difficult. The no phones at night, I don't know that you're going to get the phone out of the bed or out of the bedroom, but you can at least have the conversation. You can work on removing apps that become problematic and so forth. But you can also model. And at dinners, everybody turns off their notifications or whenever there's a family thing to the extent possible. Obviously if it's an emergency situation. All right, so how do we reduce stress and gain momentum for our kids? It's mostly about routines. So much in life is easier when we know what to do. I mentioned the ABCs. That is in the most stressful situation. Airways, breathing, circulation. But just simply getting the day started. I don't know if any of you ever had a stressful day getting your kid out the door? No, it was just us. Okay, so you know what it's like. You want to prevent that. And the best way is, again, if you can co-create the routine, if they can write down the checklist, better. If they're too young to write down the checklist, they can draw a picture. You can have little icons. All right, after school, again, routines. I would suggest not having them go immediately into homework. Think about it. They just did their first job of the day, school, unpaid labor. They didn't even choose the job. They can't choose to leave the job. And then for some crazy reason beyond me, the school actually gives them more work to do when they go home to their second unpaid job, which is homework. How does that make sense for anybody? All right, I know there's good things about homework too. I was a school principal, as a school teacher. I started a school. I actually believe in homework, some of it. But it's got to be at least from a place of empathy when we're pushing these kids, right? Finally, the evening routine so that they can wind down. And I thought Joe did a great job explaining about blue light, et cetera. And then the best regulator of all, back to the center of the executive function wheel and the first part, the north part of the compass. If we have a good relationship with our kids, if we're open, if we have if we put money into the relationship bank account, the RBA, if we put in deposits like compliments, not vague, empty compliments, but specific, timely compliments like, I noticed that you did such and such. That was really cool. Or I read your opening to your English paper, really intriguing. I really learned something from that, etc. We put those little deposits in. Then when we need to say something like, look, you didn't take out the trash and you said you would. So what's up with that? When can you do it? Say anytime in the next 3 minutes. Yeah, that's a minor withdrawal, but it's a good one. Okay. Or we need to do a withdrawal like, I am really disappointed, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, I don't know, we lose our minds for a minute, right? We get dysregulated. I mean, I never had that happen, but no, of course we all have that happen. But they understand, and if there's money in the bank, it works. So the relationship, the rose, thorn, bud, what's something good that happened today? What's something bad? What's something that is kind of you're looking forward to, whatever, that kind of thing. There are a lot of ways to do it. Yeah, doing the play thing, listening without trying to fix, so hard. Quick story, my older daughter, when she was in high school, she came home one day and said, I can't do this Spanish project. It's too much. I was like, why is it too much? She said, I have an hour of homework in every single subject, plus this. I don't know when I'm supposed to do it. And I'm in theater practice. I was like, well, are you coming to me as like dad and you just want to vent, or are you coming to me because you know what I do for a living and you want advice? And she's like, okay, fine, I'll take the advice. I said, I'm just going to ask a question. How much are the assignments worth for Spanish that you're doing? It's like 2 points. I said, well, how much is the project worth? She said, 40 points. I said, do the math. She said, oh my gosh, I don't have to spend an hour. I could spend 15 minutes max and not really lose anything. And I'd get really good progress on the project. So it's like lots of coaching over time, but she internalized that kind of thing. All right, so what are we looking for? We're trying to get our kids to have courage and to feel the compassion from us and to develop their skills. So it does begin with acknowledging whatever's on their mind. It might be school safety. For some kids, my kids, climate change bothers them. It could be politics. That could bother everybody these days. We need to teach them how to cope. The breathing, I mentioned, reframing, rain dumps, really good stuff. Blah, 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 blah. This is what's on my mind. I can't fall asleep. This was on the phone with my younger daughter yesterday. Just put it all down. Oh, yeah, I used to do that. Do it again. And then they can put it into the circles of control, right? Control is what you control. Influence, you don't really control it, but you have a shot. And then there's all the stuff we just worry about. That's the outer circle. And once you've got your brain dumbed down, you just label it. Control, influence, worry. May as well let the worry stuff go. Or find a way you can have some influence. Focus on where you control. So that's how we can help them. These are things we can direct them to where they can have their energies go toward things that bring value to them. So I know I mentioned earlier all the homework that they must do, the behavior in school that they really need to try to do all the time. But if you can give them something of value, and help them figure out what is interesting, cool, fun, meaningful. That's where it's at. I had one student, mom said, he needs extracurriculars for college applications. I'm like, oh, what is he interested in? I think he should join some of the sports teams. I met with him. What do you want to do? He said, I don't know. I don't really want to do anything. I said, your mom thinks you should join a sports team. Burst out laughing. This was not a sporty Spice kid, believe me. And not totally out of line. He just thought it was stupid. Team sports were dumb to him. I said, what is interesting? No one would probably let you do this, but it would be fun. And he said, improv comedy. Well, he started the first ever improv comedy group at his high school ever. 30 kids joined. That was a big deal. Way better than just joining a team that he had no interest in. So we're nearing the end of my section on kind of simple solutions and tricks, more on the Q&A, but I want to say here that I'm using the word recognizing in two different ways here. Recognizing that our child is gaining strengths means two things. The first is, oh, I can see it because I'm seeing things like they're using better systems and I'm not nagging as much. That's a really great thing. But by recognizing, I also mean according recognition, acknowledgement, saying, I see this. Are you noticing that too? Or because that is how it reinforces. We want to elevate their achievement. We want to capture. It's like a picture on the fridge of an accomplishment. And that picture on the fridge is a reminder of what they're capable of. So if they are succeeding, catch them being good. Can they do these things increasingly? So next step is parents. Here it is. Just pick one point on the compass where you feel like your child could use some help. Don't try to. It's too much. If it's self-regulation, if you know that they're a really anxious kid, just research that a little bit more. Ask a question. We'll tell you more. Joe and I are happy to answer that. Give you specific examples. If it's not that, let's say it's, for example, just getting started. Yeah, they're actually super relaxed, but they have terrible time getting started on things. They think they're boring or they're totally disorganized. Choose one place, one strategy. Be consistent and compassionate. Celebrate the effort, not just the outcome. That's really important because with effective effort, the outcome will get there. We talk a lot in my company about, the patience of growing trees. You don't put a seed in or even a small, sapling kind of thing and look at it every day and go, it's not growing. It's the same as yesterday. It's a tree. You can't look at a tree from day to day and see it growing. So with our kids, the changes take time. Change over time is a difficult thing. We don't get the lapse photography of, oh, look at my child. Oh, how amazing. No, we have to look every single day and go, doesn't seem like anything's changing. And then one day you realize, oh my gosh, they just started their homework right away. And now they're turning it in. They didn't leave it on the desk. Wow. So we want to celebrate the effort because the outcomes will come. Joe's book has a better, cooler cover now. It's back there. My book's back there. If you'd like copies, we're happy to share them with you. The last thing I'll just ask, if you want a copy of the slide deck easily sent to you or give us any feedback you want to learn more, scan the QR code. We'll send it over to you. I think this is where we would be delighted to stop and answer any questions. They can be small questions, big questions, general questions, specific questions. We'll do our best to answer them. So Joe and I will be up here and we'll pass the mic back and forth as you would like. What got you out here tonight? What's on your mind? You want to start? I see people that are thinking, oh, yeah, go for it.
So, we've got a middle schooler, he's an only child.
Yep.
And, boys, girls are struggling, but I feel at some level that boys are starting to struggle a little more in today's world. And, we've all seen the Netflix, So, so with that, we're just sort of trying to keep tabs on where he's at. And, the self-regulation bit is so critical, and he's a good kid. But we're just kind of monitoring him where he's at, and as he gets ready to go to high school, and want to get educated about what to expect. Pick up a lot of it. So I was really curious to learn more and to further educate myself.
Well, thank you for the comment. And, I think the implicit question there, one way is my kid going to be okay? And that is the title. I put that because that you don't have to buy the book. Just read the cover. It'll help you a lot because beliefs do fuel the way that they feel, the way they feel we feel. If they feel that we feel confident in them, that gives them confidence in a lot of ways. I'll take first crack at this. I'll pass it over to Dr. Moldover. So I was actually on Good Morning America not too long ago about specifically boys and the growing kind of problems boys are experiencing in school and falling behind. I do think it's a little bit funny because it's always been like girls have had so many disadvantages, and it's just it's kind of the prejudices or the negative assumptions about girls' achievement, for example, about math, have been starting to get dismantled. We're starting to see, girls are actually often they can do a lot of things better than boys because girls develop earlier and, have certain skills very, very stereotypically, but generally, boys tend to struggle in certain ways. Anyway, long story short, I'm demonstrating my boyness right now. The normal development for boys in middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade is a particular disaster. It's like you're no man's land in 7th grade. 6th grade, you still a little bit, especially in the 6th or 8, the teachers are looking out for you. 8th grade, the mission's clear, getting you ready for high school. 7th grade is a bit of a wasteland. It's hard. But with the boys in this whole trajectory, both boys and girls and different gender identities, they're all struggling with identity in middle school. They're trying on identities like new clothes, right? I mean, like, what would this be like? I think I'm goth today, right? So that's part of it. The ability to buckle down and get focused and get disciplined, that is an unnatural skill set. It is a really unnatural skill set, and schools demand it. There are some schools that understand building breaks, don't have long blocks. You and I were talking about this lengthy, 90-minute blocks that are just toxic for most kids. Part of it is educating teachers, but part of it is being patient and understanding how exhausted your kids are when they come home and that they definitely need a break. And that's why one of our favorite tools is the fast break, which is don't start your homework, just make a homework plan. And then you can evaluate, is this realistic? Could this possibly be done by one human in one night? Or have you, is it, so what we're trying to build is over time a sense of reality, because reality always wins. And we want them to understand, I'm going to need to start earlier, or I can't do all that in one night. I'm going to have to skim a little bit here. And for the boys, I think realistic expectations are good. It is a bit of a slog, but building some of those habits and knowing what's the next thing he needs. If the first thing is self-regulation, is the next thing simply knowing what's my first step for homework? And even if he doesn't get everything done, it's one thing done. Or is it about organization? So identify that one next step. Let's see. Anything you want to add?
I mean, I'm not a Good Morning America, so I will, I tend to.
But he's a PhD.
I tend to sort of, I mean, I think I don't think as practical a take. I will say that I think that the trap that we've set for boys in our society is sort of one of the soapboxes I tend to get up on. I think some of you have heard proposals to do things like have boys start kindergarten a year later than girls, which I think is a very interesting proposal, and is grounded in neurology and this idea, which is true, that boys' frontal lobes, their executive functioning, develops at a slower pace on average. Obviously, there's variability. There are boys who are very precocious in executive functioning. There are girls who struggle, but on average, girls develop executive functioning at a faster pace than boys. And I think that, if we think about the demands for executive functioning in schools, my take, and I think many people feel the same way, is that the demands have accelerated over the course of the last generation. When I've seen my kids and what they've taken on in seventh grade, it's what I remember being hit with in ninth grade in terms of the demands for volume, efficiency, independence, production, and and so forth. So I sort of feel like the bar has kind of been raised by about 2 grade levels, and the boys are the ones on average were plowing into that bar and hitting their heads. And at the same time, as we talked about earlier, and again, this is not unique to boys, but it's something that's happening to boys, we've given them these machines in their pockets that are, to go back to Michael's great example, the thumb, the amygdala in the middle of the brain that are constantly poking the amygdala. They're constantly poking and getting a rise of the dopamine. And what is it? It's the classics. It's sex, it's aggression, it's acquisition, it's all of the stuff that, teenage boys are interested in, constantly being funneled into their phones and demanding their attention at a time when they're being faced with executive demands they're not ready for. So I think when we see boys struggling academically, emotionally, socially, it's not a surprise. I think they've fallen into a trap that we have, as a society, have sort of set for them. And again, I'm not the optimist here tonight. Michael's here to make you all feel better. But, I think just to acknowledge that, and I think to acknowledge, I have 2 of each. I've got 2 boys, 2 girls. So sort of it's a little experiment we do in my family. But, but just sort of with the boys, just the exhaustion, just how exhausting middle school and high school is for these guys and how difficult it is to cope with that. Yeah, other questions? Comments? Yeah.
Thank you for a great presentation to you. You have emphasized the importance of playing, but kids nowadays are so busy, so many things going on. So, is there any advice you have for parents to give them more playtime?
In terms of playtime? Yeah, I mean, I guess my advice now, again, like a lot of these things tonight, I'm kind of pulling this from John Haig's book. So I think if you want to, he has a lot in that book about play and about cultivating play. But I think just to kind of steal a page from him, I think that we as parents have come to feel like if our kids are in a programmed environment or if they're in our home, then they're safe. And if they are in some sort of an unstructured environment outside of the home, it is in some way sort of more dangerous or just non-productive, is just not moving the ball forward in terms of their development. And I think we really kind of have to challenge that assumption. I think that today, in many ways, one of the most dangerous places for our kids to be is in their bedroom on their phone or on the iPad. Even though that feels safe, even though we know that we feel like we have them at home and we know what's going on, it's not. And I think what kids need is more time disconnected from the technology, off of programming, and out doing unstructured activities.
I love that.
I'll let you take that.
Yeah, no, I love that, Joe. So in addition, play should be often just kind of unscheduled, unplanned, and impromptu. So there are things in our family, we do a lot of game nights, just fun games, board games, whatever, silly stuff, cards. I always lost, but we still do them, but it's fun for them. Car time, if you're in a car, a lot of fun games you can do. I mean, there's obviously the good old fashioned, look at the signs and find letter A, then the letter B, etc. But there are ones with I'm thinking of a word, 3-letter word, 4-letter word, guess, and then you say the letters, like, oh, okay, like I'm thinking of dog, and you say, something like cab, and no letters, not in the right order, none of the right letters, and they try to arrive. It's like Mastermind, if you ever played that game as a kid, but it helps you to arrive at the right answer. And oh yeah, they all build executive function skills. They're building working memory. They're building the ability to kind of like develop logic and intuit and problem solve. So a lot of great thinking and creativity happens in play, and just plain old downtime There's a lot of good research on the value to the brain of boredom. Boredom is an underrated thing. Sitting around a little bit bored is so healthy. You know, the need to be constantly entertained, constantly, grabbing, it's just, we lose our minds over that. And instead, just kind of being with ourselves, being with the situation, being with people. We don't need to always have something. So the question, I think to really directly address your biggest concern in there, which is, but they're so busy. Are all the things that are busy, that are keeping our kids busy, the things that are the most beneficial? Or is there time for them to be a little bored or just hang out with a friend and do kind of nothing? Like there's during the week, there's a weekend, etc. But it can be hard. And let's say that they're playing soccer, right? They're in soccer team. And after the game, rather than immediately, let's get in the car and go, blah, blah, blah. We have to go home, we have to do this. What if they're just messing around on the field, kicking a ball around or just talking, and you've got a book. Let them have an extra 15 minutes. Let's play, So I think that downtime outside is good too. Really helps to rewire the brain to be a stronger and more resilient instrument, and for our kids to be happier. Yeah. Next question. Someone's got one? Yeah.
I have a question regarding the deadline. So I have one child. She's 16. She's in National High, a junior. So we all know National High is stress is super.
Oh yeah.
Peer pressure. Actually not on the parent. So I know she's also taking a lot on her own, like for APs and all the extra curriculum and all the sports and everything. So I said, you should drop this. Can you drop something? No, she didn't want to. She said, this year is really important in junior, right? So after I'm finishing the junior year, then I can rest. It will be okay last semester. The senior will be fine. So I just want to hear your stuff. Is it healthy and for the junior year to be super stressful? Try to do everything, almost no downtime.
You're a little more recent on this one. You were first.
Go first if you want to.
You go first. Well, I got a quick one for you.
Okay, go ahead.
You
Yeah,
really
yeah,
handled this one. So 2 daughters, myself, who
Yeah.
both very, hardworking. The junior year was miserable, or really fun. They both worked really, really hard.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, also first semester, senior year, right? Too. So it's not all done. Oh, sorry, it's not all done by junior year. Okay. However, largely speaking, your daughter's not wrong. Junior year it's you just buckle down, you work hard. And yet you have to also build in some sanity too. She needs that. One of our daughters is a bodybuilder. When she was getting ready for her first competition, it's really strict. I mean, the meals that you're eating and then the meals that you're not eating and then the gym workouts and everything. Is this healthy? And our daughter said, no, it's not healthy. And she knew it wasn't healthy. She said, but it's not forever. Unfortunately, it's hard to break out of that once you're in that thing. So I think that you do need reprieve, you need breaks, so that is where I think as a parent can help hold the line. Is it's a bit ironic, and some parents might be like, "What's the problem?" But with some kids, you have to say, "I let you work as hard as you want, but you need to take some breaks." You must take off 30 minutes between this period and this period for something that's just not stressful. They want us to some degree to do that. They need us to do that, and they're still going to resist us. But we're the parents, and we can still say, you need to take some downtime. And it might not be negotiate that. She's a young adult. Get junior year, but that's my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I have a daughter who's a junior as well. So I'm in that same boat, and also her next older sibling is in freshman year of college, who just got past that senior year that she's talking about. I mean, I agree with Michael, and I'm not going to tell anybody that junior year is not important, for college, and it is kind of like that period of time before the bodybuilding competition where you just have to go through this stuff. But I also sort of really worry about teenagers developing this mentality that I think is very easy to get into. That's like, oh, if I can just get over this next hill, if I can just get through this, then it'll be okay. Because I mean, the thing is, senior year is not easy. Senior year is not downtime. I mean, they're applying to college and and then freshman year of college is not easy. And then sophomore year of college. And I just sort of feel like it's very easy to kind of get for our kids to get into this mentality where it is constantly crunch time, where it's not just this month or this semester or this year, but where they are constantly feeling like they've got to clear this next hurdle. And then before they know, not to be dramatic about it, but their childhood's kind of gone by. And so, I think I acknowledge for my daughter that it's a big year. I remind her it's a big year when she's not doing her homework or something like that. And I think that's just the world we live in. But I really agree with Mike. We've got to teach them to take care of themselves. We've got to teach them to have downtime. We've got to teach them to be bored. We've got to teach them to have pointless afternoons where they're hanging out and they're not accomplishing anything. And I think that if we don't do that, then we're not giving them the tools to be happy and to kind of ever get to a place where the stress level goes down.
Any time for one more, or is it kind of?
One more. We can do one more. Helen, oh yes, please.
I also have a 16-year-old junior.
We do a support group.
And I am actually in conversation with tomorrow. But the buy-in for him is not there. He's not recognizing that he's having difficulty organizing his time, managing his time, prioritizing. What are magic words, or like what's a moment in which I can kind of go in and say, like, look at, you don't want me to be at that stage where I'm still putting your stuff out and on your desk, saying that we need to do this first, the second. You don't want that, right? This want this to go away, but you're not doing your stuff.
So I'm gonna turn over to Mike. I'm just gonna say two quick things. First of all, you've already stumbled on it to, I think, a really important point about teenagers, which is what they want is to get rid of us. And so the carrot that you're holding out is like, you can fire me if you do this on your own. And it sounds like you figured that out. And I think that's a really important concept, that at the end of the day, what they want is to be independent and for us to get lost. And that's also what we want. And so where there is this sense in which we're kind of pulling in the same direction. So I think that's very important. I'll also turn it over to Michael and just say, I think Beyond Book Smart is one thing. I don't work for Beyond Book Smart or I get kickbacks or anything like that. So I'll just sort of say in a completely objective way. I think one really unique and important thing about Beyond Book Smart is it's a model that really acknowledges this and understands that kids do not come to the experience of getting help motivated to get help all of the time or even most of the time. So I'll let you.
Quick answer with an anecdote and then a more direct question. I had a student who was at the Rivers School, and first meeting, I said, how much of this was your idea? How much was your parents' idea? He said, that would be 100% my parents' idea. And I said, the balance? He said, yeah, the 0% remaining was me. And I said, got it. What would it take to have you be interested? He said, I don't even know. I said, let me ask you differently. Why aren't you interested in getting the help when your parents are so gung-ho about it? And he said, 2 words, assignment notebook. I'm like, what about it? He said, my parents say I have to use an assignment notebook. And I don't want to use it. I said, well, do you have a reason? He said, yeah. All the assignments are posted on the school website. This is wild. And I said, all of them? He said, well, all except the English teacher. I said, well, what do you do for the English teacher? He said, I write it in the assignment notebook, of course. So I said, you're not opposed to the assignment notebook, just opposed to using it for no good reason. He said, yeah. I said, would that be possibly true of working with our coaches, because you probably want to work with them just for the sake of it. But if there was something specific that you really could get out of it, he's like, I don't know, I need to really think about it. And we had an open and honest conversation to figure out whether it really was a good thing. He found a purpose. For him, it was writing. He really wanted to be a better writer. He was tired of getting B's, and B's aren't bad, obviously, but for him, he really wanted an A, in English class. That's what we focus on. Well, but that, it has to be what's in it for me. They have to see what's in it and they have to arrive at it. And to Joe's point, and also just something my wife, as a psychologist, often says, her line is, you can say to your kid, look, I'm the CEO, or your parents are the CEOs here, but you're the vice president of your division. And we'll give you as much latitude as we think you can handle in running your division. But if your division's not going well, expect us to intervene. And that's kind of the message. They sometimes getting some outside help allows your kid to have more freedom. So there can be a bit of a quid pro quo here, a bit of an agreement that this is what it would take for us to be confident that you don't need this. But you can go either way. Give him a chance to kind of show you he doesn't need it, or let him start with it and then prove he doesn't need it over X period, X number of weeks or months or whatever you guys agree on. Great question. Joel, I'll stick around. I know there was someone who might have an announcement here.
Yeah. I don't think I need to keep that official, but
Let's go for it.
topic, and Dr. Moldover didn't thoroughly scare you enough with all the data, and then if you were already interested in, or you got interested in it, whenever he shared the data about your smartphones, social media, and the impact it's having on our kids and mental health, I just wanted to make you all aware of a group in town called Let's Give the Kids, and we attempt to address those scary facts by really embodying Jonathan Haidt's 4 norms of doing smartphones, doing social media, more of a play-based, unstructured play, and no phones in school. We try to work all the policy makers to address that. So I have some information about that if you all be interested in joining us in addressing this in a community-based collective action way.
Thank you so much. And we'll just end by, Helen, thank you so much. And you can close out if you want. And Joe, Dr. Moldover, if you ever need help with your child to get it figured out, he's the guy. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.